Commander Zethkar walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council war chamber. His heavy footsteps echoed across the polished metal floor. The sound made several council members look up from their glowing data screens. Some of them stepped back when they saw him. Zethkar understood their reaction. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin covered in battle scars. His forearms ended in claws that had torn through enemy armor on dozens of worlds. Red eyes glowed in his angular skull. 2 rows of sharp teeth showed when he spoke. He had fought wars for over 300 years. "Commander," said Council Leader Thys, her blue tentacles waving nervously. Zethkar nodded once. He never wasted words. The war chamber held representatives from 47 different species. All of them had heard stories about the Vorthak warrior, who never lost a battle. They knew he had crushed the crystal armies of Kepler 442. They knew he had survived the hive swarms that ate entire solar systems. They knew he had walked alone through poisoned wastelands where nothing else could live. "You called me here about the Devourers," Zethkar said. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. "Yes," Thys replied. "After 50 years of silence, they are moving again. They consumed the Outer Rim colonies last month. Nothing survived. No plants. No animals. No bacteria. They left empty worlds behind." Zethkar had fought the Devourers before. They were an ancient enemy that traveled between stars in massive ships. They stripped entire planets of all life, turning everything into fuel for their endless hunger. No one knew where they came from or what they really wanted. They simply consumed everything they found. "We need every warrior species to join the fight," said Ambassador Korath from the hegemony. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon." "Agreed," Zethkar said. "What forces do we have?" Thys activated a holographic display. It showed star maps with colored dots representing different fleets. The Vorthak battle groups, the hegemony war fleets, the crystalline defense forces, and the Hive Guard units. "But we have a new potential ally." The display changed to show a small yellow star with several planets around it. One of the planets was mostly blue and green. "This is the Sol system," Thys explained. "The third planet is called Earth. A young species lives there. They call themselves humans." Zethkar studied the data on the screen. They have only been in space for less than 100 years. Their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are weak. "Why do we need them?" "Because they asked to help," said Korath. "They heard about the Devourer attacks through our communication networks. They want to send ships and soldiers to fight with us." Zethkar made a sound like grinding metal. It was his version of laughter. "These humans must be very stupid, or very brave. Probably both." "Zethkar, there is something else," Thys said quietly. "Something that concerns us." The display showed videos of human conflicts. Zethkar watched scenes of their wars. He saw their crude weapons and simple tactics. Their battles looked small and messy compared to the clean efficiency of proper warfare. "What am I supposed to see here?" he asked. "Watch how they fight," Thys said. "Look at what they do to prisoners. Look at how they treat their wounded enemies." Zethkar watched more carefully. He saw human soldiers carrying injured enemies to safety. He saw them sharing food with captured opponents. He saw them building hospitals for both sides after battles ended. His red eyes narrowed in confusion. "This makes no sense," he said. "Why do they help those who tried to kill them?" "We do not know," Korath admitted. "Their behavior is unlike any species we have encountered. They seem to care about the welfare of their enemies. They show mercy, even when it gives them no advantage." "That is not how war works," Zethkar said firmly. "You destroy your enemies completely. You take their resources. You expand your territory. You ensure they cannot threaten you again. This is the way of all civilized species." "Yes," Thys agreed. But humans do not seem to follow these rules. Some of our military advisors are concerned about fighting alongside them. They worry that human tactics might interfere with proper battle doctrine. Zethkar studied the human data again. Their planet showed signs of recovering from multiple wars. Instead of leaving devastated wastelands, they had rebuilt their cities. They had replanted their forests. They had cleaned their oceans. Even more strange, they had created laws to prevent future wars. These humans confuse me, he admitted. But confusion is not dangerous. If they want to waste resources on foolish mercy, that is their choice. Their weakness will not affect my victory. Will you meet with their delegation? Thys asked. They are waiting at Orbital Station Harmony. They want to discuss joining our forces. Zethkar considered this. He had met with hundreds of species over the centuries. Some had been worthy allies. Others had proven useless in battle. A few had tried to betray him. None had ever surprised him. Each species followed the same basic patterns of survival, expansion, and dominance. I will meet them, he decided. But I will not waste much time on this. If they cannot contribute meaningful military power, I will send them home before they get in our way. Understood, Thys said. Their ambassador is named Park Min-jun. Their military advisor is Captain Kim So-young. They have small escort ships, but no major battle vessels. Of course they do not, Zethkar muttered. Young species never have proper weapons. As he prepared to leave the war chamber, Zethkar felt the familiar confidence that came before meeting new allies. He knew exactly what to expect. The humans would be eager to prove themselves. They would boast about their fighting spirit. They would make grand promises about their contribution to the war effort. Then, reality would show them how unprepared they truly were. He had seen it countless times before. Young species always thought they understood warfare until they faced real enemies. The Devourers would teach these humans the truth about survival in a hostile galaxy. If any of them lived long enough to learn, Zethkar walked toward his ship, already planning how to use human forces as cannon fodder in the coming battles. Orbital Station Harmony floated in the neutral space between 3 star systems. It was built for meetings between different species, who might not trust each other completely. The station had multiple environmental zones to accommodate various forms of life. Zethkar's ship docked at the military section designed for heavy atmospheric requirements. He walked through the corridors toward the diplomatic meeting rooms. Other species moved out of his way as he passed. This was normal. Most beings found Vorthak warriors intimidating. Zethkar preferred it that way. Fear made negotiations simpler. The meeting room had a large oval table with chairs designed for different body types. Zethkar took his position at one end, his massive frame filling the reinforced seat. He activated his personal shield generators and weapons scanners out of habit. Always be prepared for betrayal. The door opened and 2 humans entered. Zethkar had seen images of humans before, but meeting them in person felt different. They were small compared to him, barely reaching his chest height. Their skin was soft and pale. They had thin limbs and delicate features. No claws, no armor plating, no visible weapons. They looked fragile, but something was wrong. The moment they walked into the room, every instinct Zethkar had developed over 3 centuries of warfare began screaming. Danger. Threat. Be careful. His hand moved toward his sidearm before he could stop himself. Yet he could not identify any actual threat. The humans carried no weapons. They showed no hostile body language. They did not try to intimidate him. If anything, they seemed completely relaxed. Commander Zethkar, said the first human, a man with dark hair and kind eyes. I am Ambassador Park Min-jun. This is Captain Kim So-young, our military advisor. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Zethkar studied them both carefully. Ambassador Park wore simple diplomatic clothes. with no armor or protection. Captain Kim wore a military uniform, but it looked more ceremonial than functional. Neither of them seemed concerned about being in the same room as a legendary Vorthak warrior. "You asked for this meeting," Zethkar said. His voice came out harsher than usual. Something about these humans made him feel defensive. "Speak quickly. I have important work to do." "Of course," Park said, sitting down across from him. "We know you are very busy. We have great respect for your experience in warfare. We read about your campaigns against the Shard Collectives and the Hive Swarms. Truly impressive victories." Kim nodded in agreement. "The tactical reports from the Battle of Kepler 442 are studied at our military academies. Your use of environmental weapons against the crystal formations was brilliant." Zethkar waited for them to continue praising his achievements. Most species did this before asking for his help. It was standard diplomatic behavior. But instead of continuing, Park leaned forward with genuine curiosity. "Tell me," Park said softly, "how do you handle the weight of command? Making decisions that affect so many lives must be incredibly difficult." The question caught Zethkar off guard. No diplomat had ever asked him about the emotional burden of leadership. "I make the decisions that lead to victory," he replied carefully. "That is my duty. But surely there must be times when you wonder about the cost," Kim added. "When you think about the soldiers who did not come home, or the families waiting for warriors who will never return." Something cold moved through Zethkar's chest. These humans were probing into areas that warriors did not discuss. Among the Vorthak, you buried such thoughts deep and never spoke of them. Dwelling on casualties was considered weakness. "Dead soldiers are the price of victory," he said firmly. "A good commander accepts this reality." Park and Kim exchanged a glance. There was something in their eyes that Zethkar had never seen before. It was not pity or judgment. It was deeper than that. It was understanding mixed with sadness. "We have brought some information that might interest you," Kim said. She activated a small device that projected holographic documents. "Medical studies on combat stress among career military personnel. Treatment options for what we call post-traumatic stress disorder." Zethkar looked at the data suspiciously. "Why would I need this?" "Because taking care of warriors is just as important as training them," Park replied. "We have learned that ignoring the emotional impact of warfare makes soldiers less effective over time. It also causes unnecessary suffering." The holographic display showed brain scans, treatment programs, and statistical analyses. Zethkar recognized some of the symptoms described in the documents: sleep problems, hypervigilance, emotional numbness, difficulty forming personal connections. These were common among veteran Vorthak warriors, but they were considered normal side effects of military service. "You are saying that these conditions can be treated?" he asked, despite himself. "Yes," Kim said gently. "We have found that soldiers who receive proper mental health support actually perform better in combat. They make clearer decisions under pressure. They work better with teammates. They retain their tactical skills longer." Zethkar felt something shifting inside his mind. These humans were suggesting that the way his people had always handled warfare might be wrong. They were implying that caring about the psychological welfare of soldiers was not weakness but strength. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. Park smiled sadly. "Because we recognize a fellow warrior who has carried too much weight for too long. Because we think you deserve better than the loneliness that comes with command. Because we believe that taking care of each other is what separates civilization from barbarism." The words hit Zethkar like physical blows. No one had ever spoken to him about loneliness. No one had ever suggested that his way of life might be unnecessarily painful. No one had ever offered him care instead of asking for his services. "I do not understand you," he said quietly. "That is okay," Kim replied. "Understanding takes time. But perhaps while we discuss the military situation with the Devourers, you might also consider what it would mean to fight alongside people who care about your well-being as much as your tactical abilities. Zethkar sat in silence for several minutes. His combat instincts were still screaming warnings. But now, he began to understand why. These humans were dangerous not because they threatened his life, but because they threatened his entire worldview. They offered something he had never experienced. The possibility that strength and compassion were not opposites. For the first time in 3 centuries, Commander Zethkar felt genuinely afraid. 3 weeks later, Zethkar found himself aboard the human vessel Harmony's Edge in the Sigma Draconis system. The ship was smaller than his usual command cruiser, but it was well designed and efficiently run. He had insisted on observing human forces in actual combat. Only battle would reveal their true nature. The Devourers had established a forward base on the 4th planet. Intelligence reports showed they were processing the planet's biomass to fuel their main fleet. The Joint Task Force needed to destroy the base before it became too strong to assault. Zethkar stood on the bridge watching the human crew prepare for battle. Captain Kim So-young moved between stations, checking readiness reports and discussing tactics with her officers. What struck him most was how they talked to each other. There was no shouting, no threats, no intimidation. They spoke quietly and listened carefully to each response. "Commander," Kim said, approaching his position, "would you like to review our battle plan?" Zethkar nodded. The holographic display showed the Devourer base surrounded by defensive positions. The human plan called for multiple small strikes rather than one massive assault. It was more complex than necessary, but not completely foolish. "Why do you not simply bombard the base from orbit?" he asked. "It would be faster and safer for your troops." "Because orbital bombardment would destroy everything on the planet," replied Lieutenant Park Jun-ho, the tactical officer. "There might be survivors down there, prisoners taken by the Devourers, or native life forms that escaped the initial consumption." Zethkar frowned. "The probability of survivors is very low. You are risking your soldiers for a small possibility." "Even a small possibility of saving lives is worth some risk," Kim said simply. The first wave of the assault began with Vorthak heavy assault troops leading the charge. Zethkar watched from the command center as his warriors smashed through the outer defenses. The Devourers fought back with their usual vicious efficiency, but Vorthak armor and weapons proved superior in direct combat. Then something went wrong. A Vorthak squad became trapped in a collapsed bunker system. Enemy fire prevented any rescue attempts. According to standard military doctrine, they should be written off as acceptable losses. The assault should continue without delay. But the humans did not follow standard doctrine. "All units, this is Sergeant Lee Hee-jin," came a voice over the communication system. "I have eyes on the trapped Vorthak position, requesting permission to attempt extraction." "Negative, Sergeant," Kim responded immediately. "Enemy fire is too heavy. You would lose your entire squad." "Understood, Captain. But those are 5 warriors with families waiting at home. I cannot leave them." Zethkar moved closer to the communication console. "Sergeant Lee," he said into the microphone. "This is Commander Zethkar. Those soldiers know the risks of warfare. Do not waste human lives for Vorthak warriors." There was a pause before Lee responded. "With respect, Commander, they are not Vorthak warriors right now. They are people who need help. That is all that matters." Before anyone could stop her, Lee took her squad directly into the heavy fire zone. Zethkar watched the tactical display in disbelief as 12 human soldiers charged across open ground under devastating enemy bombardment. 3 of them fell before reaching the bunker entrance. "This is suicide," he muttered. But somehow it worked. Lee's team created enough distraction for the trapped Vorthak to escape. All 5 alien warriors made it to safety, though 2 were badly wounded. Lee's squad carried them to the medical evacuation zone while still under fire. Later, after the base was secured, Zethkar found Lee in the field hospital. She was having her own wounds treated, while sitting next to one of the Vorthak warriors she had saved. The alien soldier was unconscious, but Lee held his hand gently. "Sergeant," Zethkar said, approaching her position. Lee looked up and tried to stand, but the medic pushed her back down. "Stay seated, sir. I need to finish cleaning this cut." "Why did you risk your soldiers?" Zethkar asked bluntly. "Those Vorthak warriors were not your responsibility." Lee was quiet for a moment, still holding the unconscious warrior's hand. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old wars on Earth. She said the worst thing about fighting was not the dying, but the forgetting. Forgetting that your enemies are people. Forgetting that everyone has someone who loves them." She looked up at Zethkar with calm certainty. "I know that warrior's name is Corvin. I know he has 3 children and a mate waiting for him on the homeworld. I know he likes to collect ancient poetry and that he makes terrible jokes when he is nervous. How could I leave him to die alone?" Zethkar stared at her. "How do you know these things about him?" "Because I asked," Lee said simply. "During the flight here, I talked with all the Vorthak soldiers. I wanted to know who I was fighting beside. Corvin showed me pictures of his family. He taught me how to pronounce his children's names correctly." The unconscious Vorthak warrior stirred and opened his eyes. When he saw Lee holding his hand, he made a sound of confusion mixed with gratitude. "You saved my life," Corvin said in broken standard. "Why?" Lee smiled gently. "Because Jaira and Theklon and little Mordan need their father to come home safely." Corvin's eyes went wide when he heard his children's names. He gripped Lee's hand tighter and spoke rapidly in his native language. Tears flowed down his scarred face. Zethkar felt something breaking inside his chest. In 3 centuries of warfare, he had never seen an enemy show mercy to his people. He had never seen soldiers care about individuals rather than strategic objectives. He had never imagined that compassion could be a military tactic. That night, as the joint forces prepared for the next assault, Zethkar walked through the human sections of the camp. He watched soldiers sharing food with alien allies. He saw medics treating wounded enemies with the same care as their own people. He heard them talking quietly about home, about families, about hopes for peace. For the first time in his long military career, Zethkar began to wonder if there might be a better way to fight wars. The field hospital was quiet, except for the soft beeping of medical equipment and the gentle hum of air recyclers. Zethkar lay on a reinforced medical bed, his massive frame taking up most of the space in the recovery bay. Devourer acid had burned through his chest armor during the final assault on their processing facility. The wounds were healing, but slowly. Dr. Choi Sung-mi entered the room carrying a medical scanner and a tray of supplies. She was small, even by human standards, barely reaching Zethkar's shoulder when he stood upright. But she moved with quiet confidence as she approached his bed. "Good morning, Commander," she said softly. "How are you feeling today?" Zethkar grunted. "I have survived worse injuries. When will I be cleared for combat duty?" "Another few days," Choi replied, activating her scanner. "The synthetic skin grafts need more time to integrate with your natural tissue. Rushing back into battle could cause permanent damage." She began examining his wounds with gentle precision. Her touch was careful and professional, but also somehow kind. Zethkar was not used to being touched with kindness. Vorthak medical treatment was efficient but impersonal. Doctors fixed damage and returned soldiers to duty as quickly as possible. "Doctor," he said, after several minutes of silence, "I have been thinking about what I observed during the battle." "Oh?" Choi continued her work without looking up. "What about?" "See, your people fight differently than any species I have encountered. You take unnecessary risks to save enemies. You show mercy when it gives you no tactical advantage. You treat warfare as if it were some kind of rescue operation." Choi paused in her examination and looked at him directly. "Is that what you think we are doing?" Rescuing people? Are you not? Zethkar asked, genuinely confused. In a way, yes, she replied thoughtfully. But probably not the way you mean. We are not just rescuing prisoners or civilians. We are trying to rescue the idea that war does not have to destroy everything good about civilization. She returned to cleaning his wounds, her movements gentle and steady. My grandfather fought in the last major war on Earth. He used to tell me that the real enemy was never the other army. The real enemy was the part of yourself that stopped caring about the other army's humanity. Zethkar considered this. But surely there are times when the enemy cannot be reasoned with. The devourers, for example, they consume everything they encounter. There can be no mercy for them. You are right, Choi agreed. Sometimes violence is the only option. But that does not mean we have to become monsters to fight monsters. We can choose to remain human, even in the worst circumstances. She finished cleaning the wounds and began applying fresh, synthetic skin patches. Her hands worked with practiced skill, but Zethkar noticed she was extra careful around the most painful areas. May I ask you something, Commander? She said quietly. Yes. In all your battles, in all your centuries of warfare, have you ever fought for something you truly loved? Or have you only fought against things you feared or hated? The question hit Zethkar like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. He searched through 300 years of memories, looking for an answer. He had fought to expand Vorthak territory. He had fought to acquire resources. He had fought to eliminate threats to his people's security. He had fought to prove his strength and establish dominance over weaker species. He had fought because fighting was what warriors did. But had he ever fought for love? He began, then stopped. The silence stretched between them. It is all right, Choi said gently. It is a difficult question. Most soldiers struggle with it. 8. How do you fight for love? He asked, his voice smaller than usual. Choi smiled sadly. Love is what makes winning worthwhile. What good is victory if you lose everything that made life worth living in the first place? She activated a holographic display, showing images from Earth. Zethkar saw cities full of diverse architecture, parks where children played, museums displaying art from different cultures, hospitals where former enemies worked side by side to heal the sick. These are places where former war zones used to be, Choi explained. We rebuilt them not as monuments to our victories, but as celebrations of what we were fighting to protect. Schools where children from different nations learn together. Markets where former enemies trade goods and stories. Gardens planted on old battlefields. The images changed to show human art created during and after their wars. Paintings that captured both the horror and the hope of conflict. Music that mourned the dead while celebrating the living. Poetry that spoke of finding meaning in suffering. This was written by a human soldier during one of our worst conflicts, Choi said, highlighting a poem on the screen. He wrote it while treating wounded enemies in a field hospital. Much like this one. Zethkar read the words slowly. The poem spoke of seeing the enemy's humanity even in the midst of battle. It talked about choosing compassion over hatred, hope over despair, building over destroying. It ended with a simple line that made his chest tighten. The greatest victory is not conquering your enemy, but discovering they were never truly your enemy at all. I do not understand, he whispered. How can you fight effectively while thinking such thoughts? How can you win battles while caring about your opponents? Because caring makes us fight harder, not weaker, Choi replied. When you fight for love, you fight with purpose beyond yourself. When you fight to protect something beautiful, you become more than just a weapon. She showed him more images. Human soldiers building schools in former war zones, medical teams treating refugees from all sides of conflicts, engineers working with former enemies to repair damaged infrastructure. We learned something important from our history, Commander. Wars end, but the choices you make during them last forever. If you choose hatred, you carry that poison with you even after victory. If you choose love, you carry hope. Zethkar stared at the images for a long time. Everything Choi had shown him challenged the fundamental assumptions of his warrior culture. The Vorthak way was about strength, dominance, and survival. But these humans had found something else. A way to be strong without being cruel. To win without becoming monsters. "Doctor," he said finally, "I think I am beginning to understand why my people find humans so disturbing. You represent everything we have convinced ourselves is impossible." The command deck of the human vessel Serenity buzzed with quiet activity as the combined fleet approached the Devourer mothership. Zethkar stood beside Admiral Park Min-jun at the central tactical display, watching the massive enemy vessel grow larger on the screens. It was the size of a small moon, its dark surface covered in processing equipment that could strip entire worlds clean of life. "All ships report ready for final assault," announced Commander Lee from the communications station. "Vorthak heavy cruisers are in position. Hegemony fast attack squadrons are standing by. Crystalline defense formations are deployed." Zethkar studied the battle formation with professional interest. It was well coordinated and tactically sound. But something felt different about this fight. For the first time in his long career, he was not thinking only about victory and survival. He was thinking about what would happen after the battle ended. "Admiral," said Captain Kim from her position at the weapons console. "We are receiving a transmission from the Devourer ship." "Put it through," Park ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the interior of the alien vessel. Shapes moved in the darkness, but the Devourers themselves remained hidden. Their voice came through as a mechanical translation that stripped away all emotion. "You cannot stop us," the voice said. "We are inevitable. We are hunger. We are the end of all things. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." The transmission ended, leaving the command deck in silence. Zethkar waited for Admiral Park to respond with the usual military threats or defiant speeches. Instead, Park activated the fleet-wide communication system and spoke in a calm, gentle voice. "This is Admiral Park Min-jun of the Terran Federation, speaking to the crew of the Devourer mothership. I know you probably cannot understand this, but I want you to know that we do not hate you. We do not seek your destruction for revenge or glory. We fight only because we must protect the lives and worlds that you would consume." Zethkar felt a familiar chill run through his body as Park continued. "If there is any part of you that remembers what it was like to create instead of destroy, any fragment that recalls building something beautiful instead of consuming it, we offer you this chance. Withdraw from our space, and we will let you go in peace. We will even provide medical aid for any of your people who are injured in our previous battles." The communication system remained silent for several minutes. Then, the Devourer voice returned, filled with what sounded like confusion. "Why do you offer mercy to those who would devour you?" "Because that is who we choose to be," Park replied simply. "Even in war, especially in war, we choose to remain human." Another long silence. Then, "We do not understand this concept. We will continue our mission. Your mercy is weakness." "I am sorry to hear that," Park said sadly. "All units, commence final assault. Remember, we fight to protect, not to destroy. Show mercy to any who surrender. Treat captured enemies with dignity. Make this a battle we can be proud of when our children ask us about it." The battle began with devastating efficiency. The combined fleet struck the Devourer mothership from multiple angles, targeting specific systems rather than attempting to obliterate it completely. Zethkar watched human tactics evolve in real time as they adapted to minimize casualties on both sides. When a section of the Devourer ship began venting atmosphere, human rescue ships immediately moved in to save any surviving crew members. When enemy fighters were disabled rather than destroyed, human pilots guided them to safe landing areas instead of finishing them off. "Why?" Zethkar, asked Admiral Park, why do you show such care for beings who would consume everything you love? Park never took his eyes off the tactical display as he answered, because the moment we stop caring about the lives of our enemies, we become something we do not want to be. Because every choice we make in battle defines who we are as a people. Because someone needs to remember that there is more to existence than just survival. The battle turned decisively when the Devourer mothership's main reactor began to fail. Instead of pressing their advantage to ensure complete destruction, Park ordered the fleet to pull back and transmit evacuation warnings to the enemy ship. All Devourer personnel, this is Admiral Park. Your ship's reactor core is about to breach. We are standing by to assist with evacuation procedures. Please respond with your location and numbers so we can coordinate rescue efforts. Zethkar realized his hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from something he had never experienced before. The recognition of true moral courage. These humans were willing to risk their own safety to save the lives of creatures who had tried to kill them minutes before. Some of the Devourers accepted the rescue offer. Human medical teams worked frantically to treat alien injuries they had never seen before. Others chose to go down with their ship. But even they seemed confused by the offer of mercy. As the mothership's reactor finally exploded in a brilliant flash, Zethkar found himself thinking about his centuries of warfare. All those victories, all those enemies destroyed, all those worlds conquered. None of it had ever made him feel the way he felt right now. Watching humans choose compassion over vengeance. Admiral, he said quietly, I understand now why my people find humans so disturbing. Park turned to look at him with interest. Oh? When I first met your delegation, every instinct I had screamed danger. I could not understand why. You carried no weapons. You made no threats. You showed no aggression. But something about you terrified me. Zethkar watched the rescue operations continue on the main screen. Now I know what it was. You represent everything my culture has taught me is impossible. You prove that strength and kindness are not opposites. You show that it is possible to fight without becoming a monster. You demonstrate that the greatest warriors are those who choose love over fear. He paused, his voice growing softer. You made me shudder not because I was afraid of what you might do to me, but because I was afraid of what you might teach me about myself. You offered me the possibility of becoming better than I ever imagined I could be. Admiral Park smiled gently. And what do you choose now, Commander? Zethkar looked around the command deck at the humans working to save lives even after their victory. He thought about Dr. Choi's gentle hands and difficult questions. He thought about Sergeant Lee risking her life for alien soldiers she barely knew. He thought about the poem about discovering your enemies were never truly enemies at all. I choose to learn, he said finally. If you will have me, I would like to serve aboard a human ship. I want to understand what it means to fight for love instead of against fear. The shudder he felt now was not fear, but hope.